Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Salt Mine, where we have got a special episode coming at you. Week 5 of the NACL has just closed out. We're coming at you. My name is Gordo. I am joined by TDS, Nyarko, and special guest Cubby. Welcome to the show, Cubby, NACL color commentator, and just got off his first broadcast on the LCS stage. Congratulations on that, my guy. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys asking. I know I put earlier this year that like any NACL podcast that wanted to chat, just reach out. We'll figure it out. So really appreciate you guys reaching out, and here we are figuring it out, and should be fun.
Absolutely here, and want to open things up. Let's talk a little bit about kind of casting and development in the casting sphere before we get into NACL a little bit. We'll get to Player of the Week, I promise, but want to take advantage of the opportunity. You just taken up your latest big step up along with Deserex there, and yeah, we've been grinding it out down here casting as well. Just curious to hear a little bit more about your story. Give you a little bit of a spotlight here.
Yeah, so like my full backstory is like it goes back to college, right? So my freshman year of college, I competed in C-Law, and I was like a D1 90-ish LP player before there was like a master tier. So yeah, I was super burned out after that split. I ended up going back the second year. I competed, but I co-founded the varsity esports program, Miami University, Ohio. So we were the first D1 varsity esports program, and I acted as a coach and director after that. I always loved League of Legends. I had a great experience with it. I took a step away after college because I had a startup job. COVID kind of the day March Madness got canceled due to COVID, I lost my job. So after that, I started casting, and at the time, I hit GM early that season. I had coaching experience, and I made Big League, which was the one, like back then it was Scouting Grounds, right? So there were 6 TOs that had the Scouting Grounds qualifiers to go into the Face It Scouting Grounds circuit. That was the one that we had to audition for, or like they actually did like a formal process to select the casters. I had never really casted before, and I got in. So I was able to snowball that. I was the only caster that year who covered all 6 Scouting Grounds. Like I was on all 6 tournaments for Scouting Grounds, and it kind of just took things from there and just kept going, right? It's 2021, I worked 2 other jobs to pursue this. In 2022, I was fortunate to get the Academy offer and now the NACL offer. And then, of course, this past week, first time on LCS, which was honor and a privilege. So it's been 2.5 years almost now, going on 3 towards like May. And yeah, it's been a really good time. I love my job, and glad I got to do it on the big stage for the first time.
That's awesome to hear, dude. I forgot about the Miami, Ohio connection. I think because I've definitely seen you hanging out in the chat and stuff. They were in Risen Divine League for a split. When I was covering, I remember. That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, so I coached them in 2021. That was like one of the other 2 jobs I had as well. So they like brought me back in like a semi-paid position. But yeah, it was actually really cool. Like one of the observers that we have, Lorne, he's like works LCS and NACL. He came from the varsity program, so he was like one of the guys like had a sign behind me today. Like that means a lot to me. Like the fact that we can help kids in college like go from having an interest, like actually working and having a career in that interest is really cool. So I always like it puts a big smile on my face like when collegiate kids are able to pick up jobs, especially from the program that I had a part in. So yeah.
You were coaching for I remember you were coaching for them on an MU event, right? Like MU Legends, I think it was.
Yep, Gateway Legends in 2021. So we took Boise out. They were a scholarship team. We weren't. And we had subs, so that was like a huge... I had a great team. Like I had a lot of great kids, and they worked their butts off to make that work. So that was like a definitely a big win for us, right? Because there were some really good schools at that tournament. So
yeah, if I'm not wrong, it was the like trying to think a little bit over that time because I don't have the best memory, but I think it was like the one that the team from Array, and don't remember who else was the one that ended up winning it, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah. So that was the first tournament that University of St. Thomas competed in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was the team. Yeah, I remember because I was still trying to get involved. Like I remember 2021, like that's the year I started as well casting, but I like since I'm not from NA, I absolutely had no idea about the NA sphere. So I was trying to follow up a lot of the tournaments and all that, and that's where I began looking at the CLO as well, like that particular tournament. That's why I also got into like the array hype train, to call it that, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm also rooting for him so much right now.
I was just going to ask Cubby a little bit about kind of taking casting offline in a way, just moving to LA, being in a casting house and how that's all treating him. But
Oh yeah.
that was just kind of a relaxed thing.
No, I mean, it's been fun. Like it wasn't a tough move for me because like I love my job and I knew that like this was the step I had to take to like be able to show up on LCS and also just pursue my job and take it more seriously. Like this is the best thing I could have done for myself. It was a tough move in the sense that like I also love Chicago. Like I had great family and friends there. I mean, the academy schedule like we were Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? So like I was able to go downtown and hang out with like friends that I grew up with and I'm very close with on the weekends, which was a lot of fun for me. I saw like a couple friends get engaged and married and like enjoyed that very much in person last year. So leaving that was hard. But I mean, being out here has been a lot of fun. I'm having a good time. I love the fact like, I've got my Racing NA podcast from the couch. We look forward to that every week. And I've been able to connect a lot deeper with the scene that I cover out here, which I think is very important for the craft. So that's all been really good. There's so many good people out here that have really helped make the move easier. So it's been good.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, man. You mentioned earlier, OQs have been going on in the background. And you haven't been able to keep up with those as much. Have you been staying up to date with the kind of NACL OQ scene, getting ready for relegations and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there's going to be a second tournament, and so I think that what I'm going to do for this one is I definitely actually want to have a day where I go through like all the quarters, semis, and finals games. I know that the results obviously like Native was knocked out. That was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I know Maryville moved on, the fact that we have a collegiate team again that competes at that high of a level below NACL, I think is always very exciting for me. So I've kept up in it, like the sense that I know what's going on, but I can't like go. I can't tell you like, oh, like this game or like this draft was good or like these things were good because the amount of tape I've been able to catch is literally just stuff that like you guys send me. It's like, hey, check out this play or like a highlight like hits Twitter, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's a crazy scene. It feels like it's going. Well, so first of all, now it's on the same days as NACL, right? Which means like there's a crazy amount of North
really
American.
hard.
Yeah, so much North American League of Legends on Saturdays and Sundays now. Yeah, and on top of that, it's like on the OQs and everything, especially in the earlier stages of the tournament, both in Swiss and when you're in groups. It's just there's so many games going on all simultaneously. It can be hard to find them for sure.
Yeah. Also, like, I mean, I feel bad, like I'm not kept up, but also like in the time that those games are played, I'm getting ready to do my job. So I just have to go find a time to like put that time in later. And because like we'll have a break before the promo relegation tournament, I'll have plenty of time to prep and also sit in on scrims to get more feedback on like what's actually going on for that tournament.
And I'm glad that now we're getting like a more like centralized way to see the bots, because I remember when the OQs were starting, like it was really difficult to get actually the bots for them. So I'm glad. I think it's Smax that is doing it, like getting the Smax and Elk Battery. Sorry if I was linking that. They were doing that, so it's important.
No, like big props to them and everyone that's helping them to chip in and get them the VODs so that everything's in the same place. I think it's very, very important for the scene.
Yeah, keeping a track on those, like even us that were watching it more directly, like it's still kind of hard to keep track of all of them because some of the games were done at the same time. So if they didn't have like the direct broadcast that were covering it, we could also miss out on some of those games as well. So it was kind of difficult, but it's good that we're getting that.
And just quickly jumping in here, I want to give a shout out. I think that the Salty Runback's been doing a really good job just centralizing a lot of the information regarding the open qualifiers, and you can just check through Grapes' Twitter when these things are going to be scheduled, what Twitch channels they're being broadcasted on, and eventually, as you're talking about TDS, where they're going to be saved. So I really like the fact that we've been given the space in the amateur community to just kind of assemble a whole infrastructure to really make sure that people can catch all of these games in the qualifiers, and they've been bangers. They've been very, very exciting.
Yeah, Nyarko, internet struggling a little bit there, but you can hold on. It's all right. I think we're just barely audible.
I was just gonna say, at least we got the shout out to Salty Runback, and we also got the shout out to everyone here. So like that's the
Exactly,
important
and
part.
I'm gonna keep that shout out train going. Just to
Cross
emphasize
promote.
even more, for sure,
Definitely.
man. To emphasize what how much Smacks and Grapes I think have accomplished, and Alk Battery in particular, just because coming into these OQs, behind the scenes, it was a little bit unclear, who is going to be broadcasting, because Rally Cry is only personally streaming, one series or whatever a day. And it was pretty unclear in like the OQ discussions for a while. Like, we had all these community streamers, but who was going to get tournament realm access, and who would be able to cover things, and a lot of those opportunities didn't really end up working out the way that I think everybody would have hoped. So the fact that they've taken it upon themselves to go out and make sure that all of the OQ games get streamed, that they're going to be using, their own TR access, that even when they're not on the Rally Kai stream, to go back and make sure that these matches get covered has been huge. I think we were closer than a lot of people might realize to not having a lot of these games streamed. Anyway, that said, let's get into some NACL discourse, what we're all here for. We open up Cubby every week here on the Salt Mine with discussion of Player of the Week. I think it's going to be particularly tight this week as a race because there were so many fewer games. So many teams only played one match. Even the teams that did play multiple matches, a lot of them ended up splitting a bunch of games. So, gonna be a tight race here. As always, I'm going to let others give their takes first. Who have you got contending for Player of the Week here?
So for me, I really want to focus in on Wildcard because they had a very interesting set of matchups, even over the course of a very accelerated weekend. And in particular, I want to highlight Soligo on just a few standout performances. I think that they were instrumental, if not the single and most valuable player when it came to their second game against Dignitas. They also performed very well in their first game against Fly Challengers on that Azir. And I think that all combined, while just having the most exciting and scrappy games we've seen in the league recently, makes me want to highlight them a little bit more. And this time I think focus has to go over to their mid because of it.
I think Soligo's actually been kind of slept on this year. I think it's been a big part about Wildcard's success because like all he's doing is playing these control mages. And again, like when you pair that with like Ashe Zyra, their ability, or like, all these like control, they pick strong bot lanes, but also like the Wildcard for me is a team that drafts for how their champions interact like in fights and not in lane. And I think Soligo is a really big part of that because like his control mages, he's the one that has to get them through lane and then get to the later stages of the game where Wildcard drafts to be successful. And yeah, I mean, he's the reason that they won a game against Dig.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that second game against Dig, I mean, it was already, I think, in a lot of our minds, especially going back to week one, where they were doing those Zac Oriana drafts every time they could get it available. But Soligo's Oriana is just elite. Like, you cannot...
She's a slept-on champ.
She's a good champ in general, and, it's, I think, really standing out this week as it's not just the combinations and the team comps that they were drafting around it. I think Soligo is just individually probably one of the better, if not the best, Orianas in this league. He's just fantastic on that pick.
Yeah, I think all solid picks when you really think about it. Like I was talking, like I remember talking about Soligo because I feel like people obviously they tend to remember the meme parts when you name Soligo because of how the discourse, or not the meme, but the discourse around him when he was like playing in the academy and then LCS, the scene kind of affected. But I think that he was one of the parts that I was more confident in when looking at Wildcard. Now, for me, I'm still much more on the side of XU. Like I feel like everything that works from DXC is so effectively through XU, and I really like XU on DXC. Like even though they split games this week, I think that XU was doing a really good job at keeping a lot of the consistent leads from Dixie in their favor, and obviously Insanity also has a lot of part in that. But I really enjoy how like XU has been performing overall. For me, looking like the best jungler overall in my eyes.
Is that your second XU pick in a row, TDS? I gotta
Yeah.
ask. All right, man. Ride in the XU train.
It's amazing. Like it's the first time I've done this for a player that is not a mid laner.
I mean, I think XU is a pretty good choice. I think that they continue to impress. And given the fact that I'm also giving a highlight to a 2-2 team on the week, I think that it's perfectly fine if the player of the week still has a shaky game here or there. I don't think that their performance on Sejuani versus 100 Thieves was very standout. I think that they kind of struggled in that matchup a little bit. But in the first game of the series, they made up for it. I think that they had a really, really good showing on Lee Sin. So with that in mind, inconsistency does not, I think, bar someone from being highlighted as player of the week because they peak so high. And because of that, I think XU is very justified.
Yeah. I think I'm going to end up going off of a player who I've been impressed with throughout the split, and I think showed an additional layer this week that I would like to recognize. And for me, that's going to be Fake God. I think Fake God's had a really solid split all around, and I've been looking for an excuse to highlight him in particular, although I think all of C9 has been fantastic. Emenes, of course, as well, but I think across the board they've been great. But what really stands out to me about Fake God this week, on top of the fact that he plays with two different mid laners this week and sweeps both series, is, which can be said for the other three as well, is he rattles off 3 games of Deathless Scion in this week, and it's just really not a pick that I associate with him. I think of him as more of like your bruisery carry kind of centric player, but he does a great job up against both Gamsu and Haunser, who has also been fantastic throughout this season, but he gets held down, I think, pretty effectively by Fake God Scion, and then he swaps up the matchup and plays Fiora pretty effectively as well up against him. So that's going to leave me picking up Fake God this week.
C9 was the one team that went 4-0. We did have a short week. So my pick would actually be it's got to be Lost or Zazel again. Like this bot lane is just too good. It really feels like, just given the meta right now, like I think that C9, Dig are the top 2 teams. I think, again, props to Wildcard. Like, they've been playing really well. I can't put them in the same tier, though, because those 2 bot lanes are just way too damn good. And I really think that come best of series, when teams get to prep for Wildcard, I'm really curious what happens. And because I'm also curious what happens when Wildcard gets to prep for teams. Because they've pulled out a lot of stuff already, and I'm really curious like how much more they're going to open up the book when they do go up against Dignitas, because for me, Dig is like a nightmare matchup for them. Because Wildcard, again, is all about getting to the later stages of the games where, you scale, and then you get the team fights, right? They team fight well, and they draft a team fight well. Dignitas has been drafting to full court press. Like, for me, XU isn't the strongest member of that team because all of his lanes are winning, and he just gets to play through and around winning lanes, right? I think that's like what should have beaten Wildcard, and if that bot dive goes right and Diamond doesn't like take 2 tower shots and the third wave, I do think that Dignitas wiped 4th Wildcard again in game 2. Now, obviously, a lot of other things happened in that game, and Wildcard deservedly won the game, right? But I think that like it's really interesting how important it is to have a good bot lane. And for me, Lost and Zazel have just been like them, and Tomo and Diamond have just been on another level compared to everyone else.
And I think touching on the wildcard, like the wildcard game, I was watching it because I didn't watch it live. I just first I saw the comments and then I watched it through the repetition. And to me, like Dixie had the first game was such a dominant performance by Dig. Like I was surprised how well they just denied everything from wildcard in that first game. Like the first game was just clear cut what their plan needed to be, and they just completely they didn't have a high kill count. They didn't have a lot of aggression, but it's just clear cut domination in the way that they play that out. And I think that the second game, even though I do agree, like Wildcard played that out well with their composition, like I just feel like if that goes in a series, I don't see Dick committing the same mistakes that they did in the second game for them to fail to Wildcard in a series. Like I just see Dixie going for 3-1 or 3-0 in a series against Wildcard. I think they are a really difficult matchup for them. And I think it's exciting thinking about it when we go to that later portion of the season, how they are going to perform against certain teams. I also wanted to say we should do a what do you call, like a post standings, like what we did at the start, but after. I don't know how it's called.
Power rankings?
Yeah, like what we did at the start, but now that the season has moved a little bit forward, to compare to how badly we were at the start.
Do we
Yeah.
really want to give Bonfire the space to gloat about his dig call, though? That's what I'm afraid of doing if we do
We
get an
had
episode
so
like
many
that
off
in the
calls
book.
there.
But
What were some of the fun ones that I would have missed?
Fear.
we put Fear at 16, but I think that we were all like had a bad taste in our mouth.
Hey,
because
hey. You guys put Fear at 16. I put Fear
I
at
had it
13.
Okay, yeah. Big difference, yeah.
I had Faith as one of the better provisional teams. I'm still a Faith believer. It's just that now that is like 100% memed even by myself.
Yeah. And then the big one is our good friend Bonfire, who cannot be on the show tonight. He was on the dig train from day one. He had dig number 1. So
And relentlessly flamed for doing so.
yeah, he gets.
No, I mean, I thought for me, like when I looked at the rosters this year, I thought there were like probably 6 or 7 really competitive teams. That I like. If any of those won, I wouldn't be surprised. I didn't have Wildcard in that list. I didn't have Golden Guardians in that list, and I think those 2 are in the list now. I did have EG, but they don't have King in, so I'm gonna kind of put an asterisk on that. But it's a competitive league this year. Like I think that the level of play has been a little bit lower, just given that we did expand. But some of the teams I think are playing at a pretty high level, and I'm really excited to see those teams clash as we get closer to the double elimination bracket.
I want to take this chance to say I did believe in GGC. I was the only one, so I'll take that a small prize. But I did say Flyc was going to be below, so I'll also take that hit.
Just to get us back on track a little bit with this discussion, looking forward towards especially the double elim bracket as Cubby's talking about. I think that Captain Dig is kind of this like Batman figure where they're going to do fantastically with a bunch of prep time is probably a really good call. For me, the one thing that stands about Wildcard and makes them so interesting to watch is the fact that they are perpetually very, very scrappy, but that scrappiness doesn't work if you are kind of wise to their tricks or you're able to box them out early. And I think DS, as you were touching on with the game number 1 between them and Dig, it really is kind of a struggle for them that I hope that they overcome and adapt to as we move deeper on in. And I feel that there are a few teams that can leapfrog them if they aren't able to get that scrappiness under control or they can't direct it in a way that keeps them competitive for full best of 3, best of 5 series.
Before we move, like I want to touch because I think it's a good opportunity to also say that Wildcard and Fear probably not playing for the same as the other team. So I think that that's also something that we need to take into consideration when talking about them, because as long as they stay up, I think that they feel like they accomplished what they wanted, which is also how important it is that they have been able to perform to such a good level.
Yeah, really the not getting relegated line is huge for those guys. Absolutely, especially when competing against so many affiliate orgs. Not just the challenger teams, but TL First, FlyFam, CLG Faith, those guys. And even AoE is the tentative Golden Guardians connection, right? It seems like it's kind of just a little bit of a agreement to loan out the training center, right? But still, they would not have been the teams that people would have picked right at the beginning, and I think it is huge for them to be able to make that move up here. And really kind of contend with some of the big boys. Wildcard and Fear both, I would say, are they're easily top 10, and from time to time inching themselves, looking like they're a little bit more towards top 5.
I know that Wildcard has rightfully gotten a lot of credit for being playing their unique style and being the way they are. I also want to credit Fear though. I feel like Fear hasn't gotten enough credit for also having a unique take. Like these Olaf Seraphine comps are legit. I think you need to ban Olaf and Seraphine from this team. And I think that they actually play like really solid. I mean, I had confidence that the roster would be okay because I thought that Faisal and Perry were both Challengers Devils players based on what we saw from them last year. But I've been really surprised by how much better Manui's been this split. Really surprised because, again, I got to watch a lot of tryout tape because I was a coach for TL's tryouts, and also just sometimes I get to see other tape. And Manui has been playing a lot better now than what he was in tryouts and has really improved. And I want to give him a lot of credit for that because I think that is a big part of the reason why Fear is exceeding a lot of the expectations that we had.
For sure. Fear, I think, is a team that we have kind of fluctuated in terms of highlighting because when they were near the top of the standings, I think that they were tied for first for about like a few days. We were definitely more on the Fear train than the Wildcard train, but fickle as the bracket is, and we are I think that has pivoted a little bit, especially with all the talk of Moose Hater and whatnot, to bring eyes back for the wild card. But something to note this week, they 2-0'd against Fly Challengers, really dominant games, very, very impressive showing, I think, from Fear to keep them as like top contenders. And as you kind of highlighted there, Cubby, very impressive kind of, I think, shuffling of priority and shuffling of focus to kind of really show that every single player on that team is a winner and someone that you can really kind of focus upon. Minui with a really good setup on Seraphine in game number 1, and then followed that up with a humongous performance on that Zaya as well, alongside Trevor just being a solid rock, both as an engager and disengager. I've been really, really looking forward to their performances every week, and I hope that continues from here.
For sure.
I'm kind of curious because now actually, I kind of want to ask this of you, Cubby. Were you down on Fear because of what happened early on, or were you always like, this team, like, just by the players, they should do good enough?
I think the way that I ranked the provisional teams is I actually had AoE and Wildcard, I think, were my top 2. And then I had TLF and Fear next. And I think a part of that reason was like a lot of the tape that I saw in Minui last split, and then also like in tryouts. And I think that he is drastically improved. I also think that Shochi has done. He's held his own and done a lot better than like hold his own. I know that he had a really good split in like summer of last year. So I wasn't quite as high on Shochi as I was on Faisal, because Faisal, like, for me, is actually a really consistent player. Like, if you're a top laner and you can at least somewhat know how to like manage lane states, given like where your jungler is pathing and how the other jungler is pathing, like, I think that you're ahead of a lot of the top laners at this level. And I thought the Faisal had that in amateur, along with like some good moments when he was weak-sided or strong-sided. So I was pretty excited about Faisal. So I guess there were some surprises for me with this team, and obviously like they're higher up in the standings for a reason. And I'm really excited to see what happens in double elimination, because again, double elim, that means a lot for our provisional teams, and all it takes is 1 or 2 best of 3s to go differently for a lot of what we've seen for the vast majority of the season, to put one of the teams that has been struggling in the realm of safety, or vice versa.
For sure. I'm really looking forward to the playouts. I think that they will have kind of a new look and kind of bring back some of those narratives we were talking about earlier about prep time and just being able to figure out some of these strategies that have carried some of these teams throughout the split. But I got to say, Cubby, I think that you had a pretty realistic ranking of these provisional teams, especially versus what I did. I just double dug my grave by saying not only do I think that the coaching isn't the issue with Fear, I think that the players were just bad, and I have been eating my words ever since. This has been a running theme. I don't remember, because I was super high on Faisal before we recorded our first episode, and then I immediately dropped him back down the power rankings from looking at like 1 or 2 games, and from there, ever since, it's just been humble pie all the way. He's been really, really impressive as well. So, kind of going back to what I was saying before, consistent team all the way through.
It's all right.
Hope to see it.
It's good to eat some humble pie sometime. I've I've definitely had a good taste of that in my past. So it's good times.
So, moving on, we've got a promotion this week, arguably the first official promotion from the NACL, as Emenes has been moved into, in theory, the LCS starting roster. They say they're trialing him in the announcement. But Diplex did play an NACL game. So let's start off with some discussion of Emenes. This in particular, maybe we clip for fans of the LCS here who maybe don't watch as much NACL. What are our takes on Emenes coming in? Because I have been high on this guy from the start. I mean, he had an explosive entry into the NACL with a bunch of solo kills in that first week, and has just been racking them up ever since then. I mean, he's been clearly one of the biggest and best mid laners we've got in the NACL. What are our expectations for him moving into the LCS?
I think the expectations for Emenes are what they always have been, and that is that he is mechanically an incredibly gifted player. But this is the 5th region he's played in for a reason, right? And I think that some more of that has come to light on Twitter. I don't know exactly how I feel about it, and I don't want to perpetuate too much of it. But I think that the goal for C9 with Emenes, and the reason why he started in NACL, is that they know he's a really good player, and they wanted to see if he can handle competing at that level and then the highest level. And so the fact they're trialing him now makes sense to me. And I know that it kind of sucks for Diplex to be on a 7-2 team and playing fine, but also like the guy has 26 solo kills, and the next closest in his position has 10. I think that says a lot about how well someone's playing in the span of like what 20, 22 games. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I think certainly Emenes has kind of demonstrated that he's that guy and deserves the chance. And I think that it's a good sign for the NACL and for the LCS proper that they are giving him the opportunity to at least show what he has on the main stage. And while it does feel bad for Diplex, I think that he too can easily make a name for himself and also demonstrate that he's at an LCS level by continually performing as well as he did versus TSM this past week, right? Absolutely smurfing it on, I think it was Silas and then Jace mid. And that's very impressive stuff. So I think that hopefully there will be some kind of solution that allows for both of them to find the spaces that they're most deserving of being in. But I'm happy that Emenes is at least giving it a shot.
Yeah, I think something else that I like to consider is that I know that C9, like I think both these pickups were very influenced by their coaching staff. I think that I think for me, C9, like it's one of their greatest strengths and weaknesses for me is the trust that they do put in their coaching staff, and I think that's a very. I say that I call it a strength and a weakness because like I thought we saw that last year, like when you look at summer versus spring, because spring didn't work with the Fudge role swap. But for me, it's a very respectable flaw to have, right? Because you're putting belief in your people and like what your people believe. And when I saw these two mid lane pickups and like I talked to some people over in EU. They definitely felt like, hey, this is like pretty influenced by Viger V2. He's always been on the Diplex train, you know. Emenes, like again, very, very freakishly talented player. So I'm really curious to see how he does at the next level and if he is able to compete up there consistently, and it's going to be good for the team. Because honestly, I think what Emenes has faced in his past, it really has never been about his play, unless he's running it down. And if he's running it down, it's usually because of his attitude. So there are bots of that. So the guy's been nothing but good. I heard that behind the scenes, like he's given some really nice interviews. I think I've heard behind the scenes he's been okay so far. So we'll see if he's able to work with the LCS team. I think that C9 has a lot of really mature personalities that can handle that. Like I trust that Sven and Fudge can handle that. And not to mention the staff. So the guy's a freakishly good player, and we'll see if it helps increase C9's ceiling. So I think that's what the move's being made for. You're not making a move as a 7-2 team if you're not trying to get a better ceiling out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much what we're like. We talked about this a little bit on the chat from here before when the move was happening, and I think like the consensus is the same here in the sense that I don't think that Diplex is necessarily bad. I don't think that the idea of the movement was because Diplex was underperforming compared to the rest of the team. I think Diplex was doing fine enough. But the ceiling of the team feels like with Emenes could be higher. Like I think the difference there is between wanting to get to only be able to win the LCS or trying to go a little bit deeper, maybe international as well. Like I think that's the difference that they are trying to look with Emenes, and I feel like Emenes is a good enough mid laner to be looking potentially into that. Especially because I think that the mid lane pool in the LCS did improve a bit compared to where it was last year, and I think that having the Emenes bringing the mix of his solo kill potential and all that is a really good idea for C9. Also, like in a role that like recently, I don't think consistently you see that many solo kills. Like you have to be doing something consistently good to get that many solo kills in mid lane, particularly.
I will say that his champion pool definitely is more lane focused and assassin focused. So as always, there's more behind the stats. But still, you cannot discount that this guy's been so freakishly good in NACL, and I'm really excited to see what he does in LCS.
Maybe C9 just saw the extra engagement that Sven got from that handshake drama, and they just said, we want some more spice, so we're just going to be bringing in Emenes as the mid laner and see if that leads to some more Twitter threads.
Emenes, go like the tweet where it says that the fraud's been benched. That's what C9 did. Yeah.
That's the coaching staff too. It's actually the coaching staff at all levels.
That's the content staff.
See, as long as he's working out that effectively already for the C9 brand, doing amazing job. I will say though, one thing that I wanted to touch, because talking about the changes, and you touched on the bot lane from C9, I was expecting to see C9C players go up. I was thinking it was going to be Lost and Cecil, not on the C9 team, but I was
Really?
thinking some LCS team would take them. Because
Oh,
some like if a LCS team struggles, I was thinking the first ones to go would be Lost and Sazal because I think that they are a good bot lane and they also have LCS experience, and it's something that a lot of LCS teams do value a lot when they take like from below. So I was expecting them to be taken, but like it's surprising to not see them yet considered. Not for the C9 main team, but for other teams maybe.
that's interesting. I know that in the terms of Zazel, first off, I think that whenever Zazel's competed, he's been very good. Um, but I know that Zazel, he might be at the point of like his career where like he can afford to be picky. Like I know that he likes C9 a lot. I don't know what his contract's like or like what kind of clauses. Also, like Unforgiven's in NACL. So that like I don't know what the buyout is there, but if anyone wants to pony up, then
Yeah.
he's really good. He
Yeah.
is probably the best player in the league. So yeah, I'm really curious, what like kind of ends up happening. Because I do think there are a couple moves that could be made. Another one, IMT could put another import if they wanted to play Balulu.
Yeah.
Um,
That's my pick that's my call of the split is that Balulu plays some
And-
LCS games.
when you're looking at Dignitas and their challengers team and their LCS team, you got to wonder what happens there, right? So, I am curious. I am curious to see if any changes are made as we continue throughout the season. Obviously, I like to push our challenger players. I also I do really like ABO. He's a great guy, and I think he is a decent player, who definitely likes to make plays. But Balulu is also, Balulu's pretty. He's been pretty good so far. So we'll see.
Yeah, agree. And that's kind of the thing about Unforgiven as well, right? Is that he still takes up an import slot.
Yeah, he's a freak of nature though. So
He is quite good. He has been. I was a little underwhelmed week 1, but it's blame it on jet lag. He's been crazy since then. Yeah. So for sure, been a very impressive run from him. The big thing, just to round out the C9 point, the one thing that shocks me, and maybe it shouldn't, is, making changes on a 7-2 roster. The general truism, right, is, you don't change up a winning formula. You don't make changes when you're already very good. And what's funny about that is the exception to that rule has always been C9, right? Because you flash back to the old school kind of when they were running the Jensen Blabber and Svensker and Golden Glue duos. I remember Jat especially. He had a whole spiel about like, why are they doing this? What is this nonsense with subbing out your mid jungle when your team's already doing so well? And then they would go and do it, and they still had wins there. They made a great run that year. They didn't quite win, but they came close, and certainly looked like they were contenders.
they reverse swept with like subbing in a mid jungle duo. That's pretty impressive. I don't know if that's ever been done before in the LCS or like has been done since.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's Cloud9's the team to do it. It's really always kind of been them who are willing to take these sorts of risks to push themselves to be better, who are willing to revamp their roster that just finished 4th at mid-season and completely redesign everything. So they're going for it again here. We'll see how Emenes ends up treating them. Oh, moving on a little bit back away from the LCS, more towards the NACL. I want to talk about Team Liquid, and in particular, I want to bring up. I want to take a victory lap on being a little bit down on TL throughout a lot of the split, and I want to ask both Cubby and everybody here, is your take that TL is kind of slumping in these last couple of weeks, where they take a 0-2 week up against CLG and a 0-2 up against Cloud9 challengers, or do we think they might have been like a little overrated initially as well? Because I know Cubby, I know the NACL broadcast had 2 players in their top 5 off TL challengers. I know a lot of folks were kind of hyping this team up, TDS, as potential split winners. And they seem to have come, at least in the last couple of weeks, a little bit more down to earth. They've taken some 2-0 wins against some provisional teams in that same time, but definitely feels like they've taken a step down from where people had them maybe 2 weeks ago.
I kind of want to hear what you guys think first, because I actually share where you're at, Gordo. I had TL ranked middle of the pack
Let's go.
before the season, so I'm curious on your guys' thoughts first.
All right, I'll bust out second servings of humble pie. I think, honestly, Gordo, given the format of the NACL's season, that slumping and being overrated almost go hand in hand, and I think that both can be true. Given that TL had an easier start to the split, you can say that their later matchups are both them slumping in terms of their win rate, deviating downwards, but also beyond that, it becomes a matter of them just being a little bit more hard pressed in general to perform well. And I think that even in the games that we saw this past week up against Fly Fam, there's still clear holes, I think, in their game plan that makes me say that I overrated them at the very least. Maybe collectively they're a bit overrated, but beyond that, I do think that there is a chance as the season progresses and we see the full round robin come to completion that they'll still be able to pull back a few wins here or there. But the overarching sentiment that I have is, yes, I definitely overrated them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really went into this a couple of weeks ago before they came into their matchups against Cloud9 and CLG that week. Is they were while they were sitting on top, and I guess this is just luck of the draw. They had one of the easiest schedules imaginable through the first maybe 4 weeks of the NACL. I mean, they've still dodged 100 Thieves. They had dodged Cloud9 and CLG. They've still dodged Dignitas. They've dodged Evil Geniuses. They've dodged Wildcard. They have really managed to... they've still dodged Fly Challengers as well, if I'm not mistaken. So they really have not had to play up against some of the big dogs in the league yet, and their first kind of matchups against them have gone relatively poorly, I would say, in Cloud9 and CLG.
It's hard to not agree with that. Like, as one of the, if I think I was even an even bigger believer than Nyarko, because I won't lie, I'm biased. I had them number one because I think that I thought that APA was going to be the best mid laner in the league, so I had that bias going in. But I was expecting quite a bit from their solo laners in general, both Bradley and APA. I still think that they could be the best in the league, but like, the team overall has felt kind of weird because I think that they have good pieces. I think that the idea behind it wasn't bad with trying to mix some veterancy with good enough players. Obviously, Arrow being down there in the bot lane, I think, has been a good enough rock, but at the same time, hasn't had to me at least, hasn't had the biggest impact possible compared to where I see like APA being the one that, if he's doing well, I see TLC winning. If he's not doing that well and he's forced to go for plays and fails, TLC doesn't have that much going. Mir has been really questionable to me, and then Bradley has been really off compared to where I was expecting, and I think a couple of us were expecting him this split. So it's just weird from TLC. I still have hope. I think they can still win if they get their things together. It's just that like I feel like I should be humble enough to say like they probably aren't going to be the favorites going into it and probably not going to win it.
So I did have TLC and like one of those 6 teams that could win it all for sure, and I wouldn't like bat an eye. The reason I didn't have them like as my top tier is that it's actually bot meta. Kim Down is going from collegiate to this. That's a big jump, and I think that Kim Down's actually doing a pretty good job of making that jump. I think that he's had some bad moments, but also a lot of good moments. But I didn't expect him and Arrow to be a bot lane that could stand up to the likes of Lost and Zazel, and then now like Tomo Diamond.
Unforgiven Destiny.
Yeah, Unforgiven as well. And then once King gets here, I have mobility keeps on improving, which is great. But again, like I thought, given meta, that this wouldn't be the split. I actually think Mirror's been very good. I do think Mirror is a very good player. I think sometimes he does some really big ints, but I will always celebrate the inters if they make big plays too. And I do agree with you that Bradley hasn't been what we saw at Bradley at the end of last summer. I think the top lane pool did get a lot harder with a lot of players returning up there. And with some of the provisional top laners like being legitimately good, like Faisal and Sniper joining the league, like they were legitimately good top laners. So I think that I still think Bradley can scale. And if this was topside meta, this team is built to win through top. And I think I would start to favor TL a little bit more if that were the case. But I still think it's another part of the reason I think that maybe we've seen them struggle a little bit is that they are going for like really aggressive early game strats and Draven strats. And I think that sometimes, like, when it doesn't exactly work out, games just look ugly. And TL has always been a team that does play through early game, and that has paid off for them throughout a season when they get to the best of series. So I'm not worried about TL, and they are about what I expected. With Bradley being slightly disappointing for me, and then Kim Down. Honestly, the community was really low on Kim Down. I was in that tryout, so I'm not surprised that Kim Down's doing as well as he does, but he's still doing a little bit better than I thought.
I'll admit defeat there. I was pretty down on Kim Down coming in. I think I'm curious as to your guys' takes. I'm kind of low on collegiate straight into NACL in general. I just find it definitely feels, at least, like the level of competition at the like qualifier, previously PGQ, now NACLQ level is a step above what you will generally find in collegiate. I don't think that's a controversial take. And I find that when players jump straight from collegiate to this level, or to even higher levels, like when Golden Guardians brought up Iconic and Niles, it has generally gone poorly for them, and they've had to take some time to adapt. Thinking back, even like Spyrax, it felt like had a really long kind of, he took like a split to adjust before he really could have started contending with players who have been playing at the NACL level for a while.
And that kind of goes perfectly to something I think we were talking a little bit about this, like not touching on this on last week, and I get this opportunity to bring back my analogies, so perfect opportunity. But I feel like NA has the issue, or well, NA League of Legends has the issue that they are trying to mix both collegiate with what you would typically have in a football structure from out of NA. Like they are trying to mix their the NA structure with the more like typical structure that you would see in football out of North America. And I feel like that's conflicting because North America traditionally with the sports like basketball and NFL, like how I see it, right? Since I'm not from North America, the United States and that, like how I see it, you guys put a lot of focus on taking that ladder from high school to collegiate to professional sports. But in like football, normally, like how I've seen it, you just take this straight up. Like you go into football, yes, during your normal, you have the academies and all that, but you can debut at 16 without having to go through collegiate and all that. And I think that that's conflicting between the collegiate and the League of Legends scene. Like they are conflicting with both sides, and that's how I've seen. Like it's probably not the same degree.
No, you're 100% right. Like the argument I always use is that if you're good enough at 16, 17, you can just play pro, right? So then why do we need the collegiate pipeline? And then also, like these amateur tournaments, they're played online. So there's no limits of what kind of team you can put together. It's not like you don't all have to go to the same school, like be on a scholarship or not. There's limits still, right? I think there's a lot of value in collegiate. But yeah, like as long as the age to go pro is 17, collegiate will never be the pipeline for that.
Yeah,
I think for me.
Oh, sorry, Nyarko. Just to quickly, like I think there's like if there's a possibility to find like the sweet spot between both would be great, but like I feel like the model, like there still should be like an attempt to try and look at the model. I think that the idea that they have right now with the NACLQs is probably the best one because it gives the chance for collegiate as well to join in without having to like try and change everything up so that the outside teams don't really get the chance either. Yeah. I think that that's probably the best sweet spot at that point.
In the abstract, I really adore the concept of collegiate league, and I would love for it to be an actual pipeline into League of Legends competitive LCS style tournaments proper. But for me, there's just a few obstacles in the way of that. I think Cubby highlights one of the main ones, which is not only is the age of entry for a lot of these pros into the LCS or NACL 16 or 17, but beyond that, it almost feels that you will never peak as high as the players that are 16 and 17 and entering into the league right then if you try to move from the collegiate pipeline into these more competitive circuits. And for me, I just don't really know how that's going to change, given that the perception for esports is that by the time you're 25, you're ancient, right? I really hope that dynamic is going to get bucked. Faker and Deft putting in good work in the LCK, trying to change that around a little bit. But overall, I feel that it's going to be difficult for collegiate to ever really be looked at as a pipeline that people consistently push through. And there's also the issue of there just being a lot of, I feel, discord at the collegiate level, because after casting a few Maryville games, I can tell you the variation in competition, even at CLOL, is ridiculously high. There are so many non-games that exist, especially during the regular season, between the top teams and even the mid-level competitive teams, that it makes it difficult to feel as if anybody's truly developing through the collegiate pipeline itself. Yeah, I think it takes some other kind of competition like Maryville pushing through the NACL qualifiers, but I really hope that that can change in the future. I think part of that is also just getting a little bit more of a centralized collegiate structure. Right now, you have people competing through NACE, through NECC, through CLOL itself, and then you have a lot of teams that just go from random amateur organization to random amateur organization in their tournaments and try to build a team through that. So hopefully we'll see some more coordination on that front.
Yeah. The other player that's really kind of surprised me off this TL roster has been Mir. I was pretty low on Mir coming in, and I think a lot of my reasoning for that, obviously he had a great run as Arthur over on Chiefs, is that I've kind of been moving further and further off of Osh talent lately, just because of how much that region is kind of been strip mined by NA and the NA Academy ecosystem. I think almost like I would even say a step too far in some places, where it feels like a huge percentage of their top tier competitors were brought over into Academy in these last couple of years and cycled through that way. And just after Kevy last year, felt like maybe top of the tier Osh players do not necessarily translate to being top tier Academy players. And so I've just kind of started my baseline on them as someone who doesn't watch that much OPL, or LCO as it is now. As someone who doesn't watch that much of that league, I'm just coming in on these guys, I think, a little bit lower these days. But Mir might be changing that opinion, because, I mean, he's looked fantastic here. And Kevy has stepped up this split as well. So maybe I do need to revisit that thought a little bit more.
If I've watched the tape on Mir, I was thrilled this guy was going over. He's really good. I had him as my best jungler going into the season with Shaden, like those two being the best. Mm-hmm. And it's not even his meta. Just wait till he starts playing Lee Sin, man. Oh, is Lee Sin so good?
I'm excited now.
Yeah, we're gonna have Lee Sin again. Yeah,
fingers crossed. I love that champ. Who doesn't like that champ?
We're getting the visual update. They're gonna have to buff him so people play him.
They already have. He was buffed this patch.
Oh, true.
We're getting him more top lane, so it's okay.
True.
Yeah.
And I honestly I didn't watch previously the buffs that he got. I think top lane actually is gonna be much better. Looking at how some of the champions are working, I think top lane probably feels better.
That's another discussion. But when he is when you can't play him in top lane, it is a problem. I think he's too flexible.
Yep.
Yeah, I do love me some lane Sin, but it's a little could go a little too far.
I was gonna touch a little bit on Mir, because I thinking about the OC situation. I'm is a lot of those players, or a lot of the idea that they come through, does it have to do a lot with the spawn?
I mean I know for a fact with this one, Spawn won a Mir, right? And again, I went over the tape of Chiefs when they went to Worlds, and Mir just blew up that league, and Mir is mechanically very gifted. I do not blame him for wanting Mir. So yeah, I think that in that case, I do. And I know that also Spawn commented when he first came over, he needed someone that would use the system that he had. And so he got Harry and Ayla, right? Because he knew that he'd worked with those guys before. So that was a really big thing for him as well. So yeah, there's definitely some influence there. And I think that TL has made really good choices because of Spawn's expertise with, who they brought in from OPL so far. Again, I think very highly of Mir as a player. Thought very highly of Harry and Awen as a player too when they were in our league, and still do.
Actually, I had a second question thinking about it, because you were going back to something you were talking about. You were involved in the in the coaching trialing process for the team, right? So
yep.
do you like, I'm not sure if you can say anything about this or anything
Yeah.
like that, but do the team like that they picked, is it more focused for maybe like next splits NACL or a little bit more in the future than just this particular one?
Oh, I mean, of course, right? Like you're trying to make the best decision that you can, and like the criteria that you're making your decision off of in NACL, like the way that I always put it, you're looking for the most value you can get out of that like roster is if you have players that are internally promoted or externally sold, right? And so like a lot of the decisions that are being made by these teams are like, hey, who are the players that we can develop? Who can we put around them to make sure that they do develop and are good? And kind of going from there, right? So yeah, I mean for sure, like TL, they didn't want to just get like, you know, the purpose of NACL is not to get all the best players and go win the league, right?
Yeah.
It is to like
Tell
have
that
a
to
team.
Dignitas.
Yeah, I mean, like it's working out well for Dig, right? But I like that's what you're supposed to do in LCS, and I feel like Dig has things flipped around a little bit, unfortunately, with looking at where they're at in the standings. But yeah, like again, there's nothing like wrong with that. Like I think that in the case of TL in the past, like they did win both splits last year because they did develop players. So like yeah, if your team's good, then you're gonna win. But no, I mean like they get the most value out of this if they can take players and like internally promote them like they have, or externally sell them. I mean that's the value of the NACL roster slot for all these franchises. So yeah, like they aren't just going for the best team. They're going for the team they think can be the best, or the players they think can be the best, right? So that's like Kim Down played a lot better in the games that were not streamed, which is why I had a lot more confidence in Kim Down. He also like worked well with Core, who was very involved in the tryouts. So like yeah, like there was a lot of reasons that I had where I was like a lot more confident in Kim Down that others weren't. For like one example, and that's like why I wasn't surprised they like, in the end they did go with Kim Down, right? When a lot of people were like they saw like the few stream games like, oh, what the hell? Like, why'd they pick Kim Down, right? He played bad in those games. It's like, no, like he actually did a lot of good things like in the tryout, right? So I like that's one example where like again, the community saw the tape. They're like, this player is not the best at the moment and in those games, but TL thought like they saw everything that he brought to the table and thought that he could be the best, right? And if you want to make that decision in NACL, then I encourage that, right? Like that's again, internally promote or externally sell. That's where you get value. So whatever you can do to do that, right?
And actually, just a follow up because now I had another one that I was thinking about. Like I think we did mention this. I did mention this previously in terms of how like development into players goes in and all that. And I'm like because I once again I watch a lot of football. I'm more accustomed to football, soccer for those that like call it other thing, but yeah, soccer. uh, I'm more into trialing by fire because I'm more accustomed to that. I see players debut at literally 16, 17 years old because they're good and they trial by fire. How much do you think that's worth doing in League of Legends instead of just opting into the academy nor into LCS? Because I think that there's players that you could argue they could make the jump immediately to LCS, and even if they don't perform the best, I think that it's probably better than just keeping them in academy. And I'm more on that side.
Yeah. I mean, it is hard, right? I mean, for example, I think that Kim Down playing Academy for him, or NAC Challengers, I should say. It's the first slip up I've had.
Yeah.
Like that is
How
trial
dare
by
you.
fire for him, right? Like he's only played in collegiate and like OQs where he didn't make quarters, right? So in a sense, being in this league is trial by fire, right? I think that that's healthy, and like I'm all for that, right? Masu, another player, trial by fire this split, right? He played in PG, but like I mean, it's his first split. Yeah, everyone has to go through that at some point. I think that like it's just when do you want to pull that trigger, and it's a lot easier to do that with your developmental team than it is for your LCS team, where you know you want to put woods on the board and you have 18 best of ones to do so.
Yeah, I think that it felt like I'm saying I'm probably like the one of well, like because of how I have seen sports growing up, like
Yeah.
I'm more into just getting them to try out and see how they perform. I think LCK does this as well. Like LCK and LEC are a little bit more inclined, and LPR are a little bit more inclined in that because they also like probably their sports are more into that side as well, and that's why they are
Right.
more inclined into that. But I feel like it's such an interesting idea because I don't think there's a true and tested method. Like both can work out depending on who the player is and how they try and pull it off.
Well, like part of why you see it more in LCK and LPL, right, is that they have a more extensive developmental pipeline, right?
Yeah.
Because you have trainees, you have your challengers league teams, you might even have another team that competes in the league below that, right? for some
Yeah.
of these teams, or like you might sponsor one too. Again, trainees are like literally high school kids that are just coming to practice at your compound and work with the coaches you have, right? So then, like when they are going to be played in LCK, like you have a lot more confidence and experience with working with them, where you can have confidence that's actually going to work. Also, the format, you're playing 2 best of 3s against every team in the league, right? So you have more opportunities to actually utilize subs where strategically it could be an advantage, right? Given the format of the league. So I think a lot of that, again, that is just like the pipeline and the ecosystem. That's stuff that NA lacks for sure. Like compared to those leagues over there. And also, I mean, server size, like there's a lot of things that go into this, right? I'm all for it. I think that, I mean, it has happened, like JoJo, right? Like him starting, like it was time, right? He's 17. And that worked out really well. So I think that if you find a prospect that's worth it, of course, do it. But most of the time, because we don't have the server size, the teams don't have as good of a pipeline as the orgs over in Korea. A lot of times you end up just plucking players and trying to get them over here, the likes of Vickle Prince, or, you know, if you strike gold like you do with JoJo, then yeah, of course you strike gold, and good for you, right? But that's a lot harder to do here.
Yeah, I
For
think
sure.
that like it makes it more interesting to see how like which things end up working out, and I think there's players here to try and pull it off. Like obviously, like you're saying, probably better to try them out more in this sense so that they can get accustomed to the structure.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see which players probably can break even because like even if they get slotted in this structure, like that doesn't mean that one split from now they cannot just like explode and get immediately into the LCS like a system. Kind of similar to Emenes, but not to the same extent, obviously.
For sure. All right. Well, want to close things out here with a discussion about some of the roster changes we've seen towards the bottom of the league. So, latest one this week, TL first, moving Mia off of the roster per their announcement. She's opting to step away, bringing LJX. FlyFam also moving Maniac back to the sub position, mabooting Magudis, and bringing in Hyper off of Supernova. Want to have the discussion at a higher level, right? So now we've seen multiple players step down from these bottom tier teams, you know, between Goo and then Serenok, and now on to Mia as well. We won't count BMFX since that was before the split even started. Is there something about the format perhaps pushing teams to make these sorts of changes, especially with the risk of relegation? Not to get into conspiracy territory, but, is there something to be said about how voluntary these step backs are when you are competing under a really established organization and you're super early in your career? Curious to expand this conversation a little bit further.
I think that it's the provisional teams, you don't have the same amount of resources, and it's easier for players to step away. Sometimes, like, in the case of Serenok, he's competing on a collegiate team. So what are you going to, like, if you're having trouble doing both, what are you going to choose? The small stipend that you get an NACL? I think that if you're really trying to go pro, that is the best choice. But also, full ride scholarship while you're playing at a school. I mean, I really can't tell a player to, like, pass up on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a real life decision to face. So I think part of it's just resources for provisional teams, and then some people realizing that the schedule to go pro isn't theirs, and they're out. And yeah, we'll see, what ends up happening moving forward with some of the players that have dropped, but it's a bummer. And I think that more of the moves have been forced than, teams actually actively trying to make changes.
Yeah, and it's kind of curious because I feel like the players that like have stepped down, even though I think the most like kind of out of nowhere was Goose, because he was looking like one of the best parts from Fly Fam in my eyes, at least. I think that Goo was looking really positive and could have made a really good impact into potentially moving forward with Fly or something like that. But like touching a little bit more on the lifestyle, I think that this is one of the, like, for some of these players, first real chances that they get to actually feel how it's probably going to be if they want to keep on going for the professional life, how
Yep.
it's going to be for them to really get into the schedule, the
Yep.
practices, the champ pool discussion, everything like that. And obviously, like it's not built for anyone. I won't lie. Like I like I will say this. I wanted to be a professional athlete. I know the amount of times that you probably need to commit to being a professional athlete, and it's not a life that everyone is willing to do. Obviously, the shiny parts are always great, but the behind the scenes really does impact how much you want to commit to that. And I understand why some of these players maybe not like willing to take that extra sacrifice, because like you're saying with Serenok, like he may have to take the decision with either collegiate that it's a bit more secure and does give him more benefits potentially, and it's probably not to the same degree as what is the word, like demanding, yeah, demanding as being a professional player now committed to the professional team. So it's not like you can blame them for that. It's just that like it's the real first taste of it.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've been feeling as the season progresses and I've been watching these lower tier provisional teams and seeing the subs and the changes being made to their rosters is that while I think that there is some amount of driving force that is compelling, FlyFam, TL First, and CLG Faith to all have their changes up until this point, and it has to a degree, be tied to their win rate and performance, I can't confidently say that it is the same issue that is causing Mia to depart as it was to cause Serenok to depart or BMFX even before the split started, like Gordo alluded to. I think that it's probably a combination of different factors. Part of it is the fact that people have obligations outside of the NACL. They have either other teams that they're playing for, they're just looking forward to, setting up their life as a young adult outside of the game of League of Legends itself, right? But there's other people that I feel, may see professional life as something that they initially wanted to go for, but now that they had a taste through the NACL, they feel a little bit less compelled to move in that direction. But and part of it could just be that people don't want to be on a losing team. They find that they can maybe discover options elsewhere. And to what degree all these players operate off of these different factors, I don't know. But I think that it's hard for me to say that there's anything systemic or even anything wrong with the fact that these roster swaps are occurring. In the specific case of TLF right now, I don't really know if this is an optimization before roster lock occurs so that they could do better in playoffs. Mostly because LJX is not looking like a fantastic replacement right now. Maybe they'll get their sea legs, but as it currently stands, if TLF really wanted a hard pivot to be a winning team, I feel that this is not the correct choice for the AD carry role.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that that's the case. This certainly doesn't seem like a attempt to upgrade the roster so much as it is an unfortunate situation for the squad that they have to try to remedy. But definitely curious to discuss kind of also what this means back at the NACLQ level, because I mean, obviously you need to be able to make substitutions, especially when you have these provisional organizations with lesser resources who might just be cycling through players at a little bit faster of a degree just because of what they can actually offer those players to keep them engaged. But definitely feels like it's hard to feel, and I don't just say this because I'm on their streams every OQ, but you gotta feel for like team ambition here a little bit, right? As CLG Faith takes half their roster in the middle of the OQ tournament to sub
Not
in for
ideal.
NACL. What was that, Cubby?
Not ideal,
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's I don't get me wrong. I know the guys over at TA are absolutely thrilled to be promoting up players and to be this directly involved with the ecosystem. But it does also gotta suck to put that roster together and lose out on potentially higher placements and potentially competing to get an NACLQ spot or an NACL spot yourself. So with that said, it's curious as to, is this is this a problem at all? Is it something that can be addressed, and how would we go about doing that?
Well, it feels like talking about promoting and demoting players, not demoting, but promoting certain players and things like that. It feels like a lot of that will mainly revolve around the professional teams almost always, right? Because like the already sent the set in stone teams, how do you call them? the
The
fixed teams.
permanent,
that's
yeah,
it.
permanent
Yeah, the
members.
permanent teams, the fixed teams, they don't really need to make changes since they can just take the approach, like Cubby was saying. They just need to take the approach to develop, see if it works out, and they can wait until the end of the split. I feel like the professional teams are going to be the ones that are more likely and more consistently going to be the ones to look for these changes because like we were talking with Wildcard with Fear, they are already in a good spot. But the other four teams need to worry now if they don't do that well about the relegation tournament. Like they need to be sure that their team is going to work out. And I think that the fact that the NACLQ is allowing for or giving the opportunity for these players to be able to move up and down that effectively probably just makes it so that they can always be sure before roster lock that they can get a good substitute or a good enough substitute that can try and help them. CLG Faith still hasn't had the best of luck with that, but I think that Town and Iron should have been in NACL in my eyes as well. So it's not like I'm surprised to see them there. And a lot of other professional teams may end up taking that path if the team doesn't work out effectively that quickly.
I think Sketch is actually a good prospect for COG Faith, given the fact that he just role swapped. I think there's actually a lot, like, some promise there. And I think that it's healthy to roll the dice on your third team. And so I do like seeing players like that, even if it means that, things aren't going well. Obviously, things haven't been going well for COG Faith, but yeah, we'll see what happens. I expect them to, like, if their play doesn't improve, they're going to lose their slot. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the interesting point, though, right? Is you would think, especially historically, with how things have gone with teams like EG Prodigies and 100 Next and stuff like that, that you would want your third team to be gambling on rookies. But now in this format, especially when you're already in NACL, gambling too hard may cost you that third spot, and now you're competing at a lower level. Now you have to go in through the qualifiers if these teams even stay sponsored by their organizations at the point that they're not in the NACL anymore. So that's kind of a new layer, at least to me, it feels like that's a new layer of balance that you didn't used to have to take into account when you were EG Prodigies on 100 Thieves Next. You used to be able to really swing for the fences with these teams, and it's like, well, either you make PG or you don't make PG, and if you make it, you compete, and if you don't, you don't. But now it's like it has longer-term snowballing consequences where, if FlyFam can't pull it together, well, now next year, FlyFam has to build a roster to qualify rather than a roster to compete in the NACL.
And I am interested to see what the dynamic is going to be for some of these teams that have I don't want to say a shot at getting relegated because that sounds like they're attempting to get relegated, but there is a high likelihood or at least a chance that they do in fact get relegated. I would hope and I would love to see these teams stick together to some degree instead of just getting blown up. They can continue down that pathway of improvement that we've seen everybody on Twitter talk about that is involved with these teams. Lopoli and Myra for CLG Faith in particular, people that I really love seeing all of their content and all of their thoughts on the team, and I continue to support them very much because of those two figures often talking about being angled towards improvement. And it would break my heart to see these teams get blown up if they do in fact get relegated. But as a system, it would also, I think, be a very good precedent if an involved established team that channels all the way up to the LCS proper is willing to field what is ultimately a high-level amateur roster at that point. So I think that would be a really good sign for the scene, and it would show the passion of CLG, of Fly, of some of these other organizations to continue to be tied to and interact with the amateur scene proper. And I think that already the fact that TA is being one of these teams that they're harvesting from is actually a really good sign that they have their feelers in that world. And overall, because of that, to kind of lead back to your past question, Gordo, I'm kind of happy with how this current setup works. I understand it feels bad for TA in terms of their roster itself, but I think that for many teams, it would almost be a dream to have some of their players move up and actually operate with their organization as a springboard. I know that, for instance, Contingent, the team that I work with pretty frequently, that was, near the bottom of the qualifier rosters. They would absolutely kill for an opportunity like what Aaron has been given or what Town has been given. So I hope to see that in the future.
Yeah. And the good part, I think it's a good setup that they can get for certain teams, particularly if teams that not necessarily will always get the chance to move to go higher and be part of those professional teams, since it's going to be really big competition and all that. And who knows how if other LCS teams will affiliate or anything like that. The thing that I'm looking for with teams that are below is if they become like if they want to, instead of becoming a professional team, a professional organization for the NACL, if they decide that they instead want to be a selling team, because that's also something that, going back again to football, does happen. Like a lot of teams become selling teams instead of actually just looking to be like part of everything, or part of trying to make competitive teams so that they can be at the highest. They become selling teams, and they set up the players, they build them up themselves, they find it, and they just always have a direct like relation with some higher tier teams. They sell it. I like one big name that does that is Borussia Dortmund, that does that with a lot of their players, or Leipzig as well. They do that with a lot of their players. They found them, they build them up, and then they sell them for a really big amount. I'm not sure how much is the NACL sphere paying for players, so I'm not sure if it's a good business model or not. But it would be fun that that's something that like teams can build up to be, if they don't make it into the professional side. Like they can become the team that builds up the players so that others can look into that. And I also want to touch, because like talking about the fixed team professional teams, I think it's fine. But Wildcard and like AOE doesn't have, and Fear doesn't have that leeway of working with like the actual LCSR. So I think that they take it a little bit more, like their desperation to call it like that. It's probably a little bit different compared to the affiliated like LCS sponsored teams, because they don't have that like backing, to put it like that.
For sure. For sure. Well, I think this has already been a long episode, so that's probably going to about close it out here. Want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in, and thank you very much to Cubby for joining us on tonight's episode. Really appreciate your time, my dude. Anything you want to say, anything you want to shout out before we close on out here?
No, thanks for having me. Like I said, any NACL podcast, be happy to go hop on. Definitely had a good time hopping on here, and I appreciate anyone that's making content around the league, and appreciate all the work that you guys are doing for the OQs as well, especially.
Thanks very much, Cubby. You can catch him on NACL every weekend. You'd better be watching if you're listening to this show.
I'd hope so, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe some LCS.
Yeah. And
maybe it was fun to do it once. Fingers crossed I get to do that more often,
Yeah, here and there, perhaps. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning on in. We will be back next week with more NACL action. We're back to 36 games this weekend, I believe. So, going to have a big pile of them once again to discuss. We will see you all there.